Hi guys, today's video is going to be on the marching tenor drums, or the multi-tenors, or you can call them quads, even though there's 5 drums here, people still call them that. And they come in sets of anywhere from 3 to 6 drums. This one happens to be laid out for 5, and it is of course the practice pad version, but everything is applicable to the real drums as well. Back in the day, like in the 80s, maybe the late 70s, it was pretty standard for people to just march 3, and they would march 1, 2, 3. And at some point, I think in the 80s or 90s, it became more common to march 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You see here that I have a 5th one. This one is not 5, but we're not going to renumber them to add a 5th one that's actually higher. So this one's called the Spock. And today they actually have a whole bunch that have 2 small drums in this area. And you can either call that Spock 1 and Spock 2, or Spock and Spike, or there's other terminology for that. But we ran out of numbers essentially because we started with 1, and we're not going to change which one is 1. So when you add higher ones, they don't get a number anymore. So this does cause some confusion. When you're playing timpani in like concert band or orchestra, they're laid out from low to high. And if you play tenor drums, which is sort of superficially similar, they're sort of high to low in an expanding way, right? And that is definitely not a similar layout at all. I've had tenor players really ask me seriously if they could change the timpani in the band room to be in tenor order. And of course I said no, because that's crazy. But it is kind of funny that you have to make the mental switch, because of course on the staff, the way this is notated, the high drums are at the top of the staff and the low drums are at the bottom of the staff in order. And then you have to make the mental adjustment to where they are in space. Whereas on timpani, the high drums are on the right, the low on the left. You can match that to the staff the same way you do a keyboard, and it's less confusing. But tenor drummers have gotten away with that for decades, so we just keep doing it. You'll note, of course, that none of these pads except for the Spock is a full circle, and that's because, just like timpani, tenor drums, you kind of want a little ring to it, so it is desirable to play off-center. So of course the center of this pad would be about here, the center of this pad is way up here, and we don't need the other side because we're not even trying for the center. We're trying for in front of the center. And the same with these pads out here. They don't extend to the sides because we only need the very edges. The only one that's not true on is this small Spock drum, where you do want to play dead center on it. So if you had 2 small ones, it would be the center of both of those. So the 3 in the middle, it's sort of what you would expect. You would play here, or you'd play here, or you'd play there. When you get to the outside ones, you actually play there and there, which seems weird, but it's so you don't have to suck your shoulder back so far, and so that they're an equal distance from the center of the drum. If they were like this, one would be closer to the center than the other. It also negatively impacts how your arm has to move. So of course we do this or this, and we get the same sound, and we don't have to move our arm as far. So I mentioned crossing your hands over earlier, and there's a specific way to do that on tenors. If you're crossing over between 2 drums that are adjacent, like these two, the crossover is going to be at the fulcrum of the stick, like this, or we can do this way. If they are more than 1 drum apart, like these two for example, you cross over at the wrist, here, or we could do these two, like this, and even between these 2 outer drums, if we were going to cross over, it would still be at the wrist. So just like the marching snare drum, the marching tenors is a rudimental instrument, and you're going to play all the paradiddles and the stroked rolls and the doubles and everything. And so you can do that on individual drums. You can split it between drums. But sometimes it necessitates to have what's called a scrape, where you're going to play a double stroke between 2 drums. So if I was to do the same paradiddle, but switch drums in the middle of the diddle, that would be a scrape. You can also play rolls like that. And of course, I missed, which is a valid concern. Some nicer tenor drums have cutouts in the rims where you would scrape in order to have an easier transition between them. Also, real tenor drums are typically closer together than this. These pads are a little bit wider than would be realistic, and I don't know exactly why. One other thing about tenors is because you have multiple drums, you can hit 2 of them at the same time, just like drum set or timpani, and thus the double stop or flat flam is actually way more common than it would be on snare drum or bass drum. So being able to play two hands without flamming it and getting a perfect double stop is actually really desirable in a lot of cases. I'm not a great tenor player, but hopefully that was interesting if you have never really understood or thought about the multi-tenor before. There's a little bit of an introduction. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.